Thank you. I must say I'm really happy to be here. Um, I can't remember when I last attended an African Liberation Day event. Um, some of you may not know, but we have a Pan African Association that had organized Pan African African Liberation Day event as we have it as we're having now. Um, so let me just say commendations to the principal and your staff, really, for conceiving this event, and particularly to the students and the performers so far. I think we've all been just hugely educated by the drama and the poetry, and the dance performances. This is a very important day, Africa Day or African Liberation Day. Um, I guess it's supposed to be a holiday throughout Africa. I know in many countries of the continent they observe today as a public holiday. But really, I think when we sit here today as boys and girls, as parents, as teachers, as citizens of Africa, we really need to think about our lives, the quality of life that we live, to really look at our situation, and which means to remind ourselves of the history. When we say May 25th, where did it come from? Why May 25th? What were the objectives of May 25th or African Liberation Day? Now, I'm sure, I think the chair mentioned it in the beginning that May 25th marked the founding of the Organization of African Unity, which is now called the African Union, in 1963, which is also preceded by April 15, 1958, when at the time 8 African countries that were independent were convened or invited to a meeting in Ghana, in Accra, by the first president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, to come to discuss how to support the liberation struggles of the various African countries that were under colonialism. And that meeting took place April 15, 1958. And so by the time we got to 1963, we had about 32 African countries that were independent and formed the OAU in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. And until today, Addis Ababa remains the headquarters of the African Union. Now, it is to say that the whole idea of the OAU and now the AU was to, first of all, liberate Africa from colonialism, to end colonialism in Africa, but also to unify Africa as one big country, so that we take charge of our destiny, and pursue our own development, ensure our security, and so on. Unfortunately, until today, we may have succeeded in decolonizing, that is to end active colonialism in Africa, that is all the African countries are now independent, but then until now, the unification of Africa remains unachieved. This Africa, we all should know, is probably the most endowed continent on earth. We have a lot more natural resources, a lot more mineral resources, more land for farming than anywhere in the world. And so it is the richest country or continent in the world. But at the same time, Africa is also the poorest continent in the world. Now, that is a huge contradiction that you and I need to begin to think about. Why is Africa poor until today? Why is Africa still the weakest, the less powerful country or continent in the world? Why is Africa still controlled by outside forces? Why are outside forces continue to benefit most from the resources of Africa and a few African elites, whilst the majority of our people continue to live in poverty, in deprivation? Now, these are fundamental issues that you and I, as Africans, need to sit down to discuss. That after 50, 60, 70 years of the founding of the OAU and the independence of African countries, until today, vast majority of Africans are trying to cross the Sahara Desert, to cross the Mediterranean in order to go to Europe or America or other parts of the world to find greener pastures, to find opportunities. Why can't we have opportunities inside Africa? So you, the young Africans, need to think seriously about this. When I sit here and look at you, boys and girls, it reminds me of my own life. As a young schoolboy, I have been challenged by these ideas when I was going to school. How come Africa is so poor? How come Africa is so rich, but we lack all the opportunities that other people have? And for me, that is how I became interested in Pan-Africanism and the struggle for African unity. And so when we come to talk about this today, in the brief time we have is to say to you boys and girls, it is first of all to raise fundamental questions, to observe your society, your lives, and begin to ask questions. I think when we talk about liberation, that is the beginning point. You have to ask questions. You have to have critical thinking. You have to have critical mind. And what has happened to us as Africans is that our minds, even though we've attained political independence, until today, our minds continue to be colonized. And so long as our minds are not in ourselves, with ourselves, thinking on our own, we may be educated even to the highest level, but at the same time, we will find that we cannot do for ourselves. Because at the end of the day, the Gambia or Senegal or Nigeria or Angola, all the way to Kenya, everywhere in Africa, we produce enough educated people. We produce graduates. We have universities all over Africa every year producing millions of graduates. The people in charge of our government, of our institutions of governance and development, they're all well-educated people. So the question comes, how come with all that education, we cannot invent a vehicle? We cannot manufacture a mobile phone. We cannot manufacture our own drugs. We cannot create economic policies that will bring economic well-being to our people until today. Why is poverty widespread until today? Why are our facilities, services so weak in Africa with all the education that we have? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. Because for me, the Gambia has enough educated people that we should have produced one of the most advanced societies in the world today, in the Gambia. We have all the education that we need. But why is that the case? Now, for me, the answer lies in the fact that until now, we are colonized. For example, we are going to school, and when I was going to school like you, I have studied until university, and in every subject, I am told the inventor of mathematics is some European. The inventor of economics is some European. The discoverer of something else, even in the Gambia, is some European. A white person is the discovered philosophy. A white person discovered this and that. At the end of the day, I have not seen any black man credited for inventing, for discovering, for exploring, for creating something. So if you're educated in that manner, the tendency for you to lose faith in yourself, to lose confidence in yourself, to try to aim to be that other person is very high. And I see that happen all the time, that we seek to always appear to be like the other person. So if I want to appear to be African, I get punished for it. I think Mohammed mentioned it here, and poets mentioned it here, that if we want to be ourselves, we punish ourselves. But if I want to look like a Chinese or a European or an Arab, I get rewarded. I'm beautiful and I'm nice, or I'm said to be civilized because I want to look like somebody else. So, for example, a woman would feel they have to bleach to look like a white woman. They have to buy some hair to fall on their shoulders so they look like a white woman. But if a girl wants to play now a control or what do they need? Map or so, they said, no, you can't put on this kind of hairstyle to go to a hell, to go to an naming ceremony. And many men also act accordingly in that same manner. So what that means is our minds are still colonized. We cannot be ourselves. And so even the potential, the power, the resources that are in our own hands, the wealth in our own hands, we cannot utilize it. Somebody has to come and utilize it. This is why European, American, Chinese, Arab companies are all over Africa exploiting our diamonds, our gold, our land, our rivers and our seas, making millions, and we ourselves cannot do that. You know, all these big companies here around the world, they are using the resources of Africa to create wealth. If you travel to Europe, you see coffee alone, how coffee is making millions for companies, and the coffee is from here, from Ghana, from Ivory Coast. But the government of Ivory Coast, the people of Ivory Coast or Ghana, cannot utilize the coffee to make millions out of it, to create jobs out of it. What is the problem? When they are said to be well-educated people. If you come to the Gambia, we have an ocean full of fish. We cannot make anything out of it, but a Chinese company comes, it's at the coast in Gunjur and Kato, making millions. And we sit here, we say we are educated, and we cannot make use of our ocean. We cannot make use of our river Gambia. We cannot make use of our land to the point that Japan would donate us rice. China would donate us rice. Yet we have land from Banjul to Koina, no rocks, no mountains, flat, fertile land. You put water there, any crop can grow, and we cannot make it grow. And we sit here eating substandard rice from Indonesia, from Japan, from all other places. What is our problem? Why cannot we do this for ourselves? So, on a day like this, we need to really look at ourselves and think very hard. African Liberation Day, we are talking about it because colonialism took place, because slavery took place. At one point in our history, people from across Africa, outside of Africa, invaded Africa, enslaved Africans. I'm sure we all know about the story of Kunta Kinte, all right? And then came after slavery, when it was no more profitable for them, decided now to occupy the land of Africa itself and control our people. Now, one of the things that the Europeans did to control us, to not only control us, but to make us tools against ourselves, is to capture our minds. And they did this beautifully through our education system. Through our education system. And some of us have been advocating ever since that we need to change the curriculum of education in the Gambia from secondary to university. So long as our current education system remains, rest assured, the Gambia and Senegal and Nigeria and Ghana to South Africa, everywhere, we shall remain weak, we shall remain poor, we shall remain at the mercy of everyone in the world. because our education system is not fit for purpose. I just told you one example of who founded mathematics. It is not an African person. Who founded history. When we talk about the great men and women of the world, we don't put African persons there. So when I went to school, until I graduated from high school, I have no history, knowledge of the history of the Gambia itself, much more Senegal or Guinea-Bissau or Guinea, but I know about the kings and queens of England. I know of the empires of Europe, but I don't know about Africa. Just yesterday, I was engaging with someone about the Charoy massacre that took place in Senegal in 1940. That he came to discover that just these days. And this man is a highly educated Gambian and working in a very big company in Canada. But he has never had anything like Charoy massacre in Senegal. Said, well, that explains why, even with your high level of education, you are not useful to Africa, to your own people, because you don't know your people. You don't know your history. And so I reminded him, do you know about the Sankandi massacre? And he said, no, I've never heard of Sankandi massacre. So how can you go to school in the Gambia, from primary school, from grade 1 to grade 12, and you've never heard of Sankandi massacre? You know Sankandi? In Kia, right? You know there was a massacre in Sankandi in 1900? In 1900? So that is not in our curriculum. So how do you make us know ourselves if you don't know our history? One of our great African leaders, Marcus Garvey, said, a tree without roots, or a person without the knowledge of his history and culture is like a tree without roots. You know, a tree without roots is a dead tree. So if you don't have the knowledge of your culture, of your history, then you are a dead people. You are a dead people. And let me give you this example. I have traveled between Europe and America, in London, in Paris, in New York. And what amazes me, everywhere in London, you'll see a statue of some king or queen or general or scientist or some leader. Some monument, you see something about their history. Every building, you see some carvings about their history. It's like their history is alive in their streets, in their buildings, in their homes, everywhere. Now, when I come to the Gambia, I walk around Farato, I don't see any monument of the history of Farato or Gambia. I walk around Banjul and Bakau, all the way to Boraba, I don't see any monument about our history. So, what does that tell me? That I don't have history. Now, if you don't have history, you do not have a sense of responsibility. The purpose of history is to make us realize we have a mission. Yes, because history is about our past. And that past is connected to the present and to the future. So knowledge of your history makes you realize you have a mission. Because when we have the statue of Edward Francis Small, that tells us something. Who is Edward Francis Small? And by knowing who is Edward Francis Small, what he stood and fought for, it inspires you to therefore realize that I have a duty to continue this mission of Edward Francis Small. And that generates a sense of responsibility in you. And that sense of responsibility is that you want to serve your people. So this is why history is so fundamental, that we know history. Now, if you go to UK or France or Germany, any young person like you ask him or her about Germany, about governance in Germany, the development of Germany, about any subject, that student would make reference to the history of Germany. Germans, the French, their leaders at the time will make reference to it, will make reference to events, to places where things happened. Now, you and I, when we are asked about things about the Gambia, who do we refer to? What do we refer to? What events do we refer to? Because we don't know. So, to conclude, let me say, young boys and girls, I challenge you from today to begin that process of mental liberation. You know, Bob Marley, I consider him a great African leader, said none but ourselves can liberate our minds. The colonialists understood how to control us, so they captured our minds, so that even if they leave us alone, they know we are under their control. This is why I think one of the poets mentioned it here, or the Mr. Dabo mentioned it here. Even if you have a problem of time management in this school, we want to go and find solution from outside. Because we are so important, we cannot find solution to our own problems. So we have to get loans and grants, and we have to go to donors to come and help us. You wonder what kind of people are we? So young people, begin that mental liberation from today by going beyond your curriculum and do research. I see a number of you have smartphones. All right? Don't use it just to take pictures and put it on TikTok. Yeah? But use your smartphones and Google Africa Day. Okay? African Liberation Day. History of African Liberation Day. Google Edward Francis Small, or Kwame Nkrumah, or Steve Biko, or America Cabral, names like that. Okay? Google about Mali Empire, Ghana Empire, and so on, so that you begin to research to get to know yourselves. When I did this, there was no smartphone, but I had an issue with the education I was getting. I felt this is not right education for me. I discovered it very early in my life. And so I went to libraries to look for other books that are not in the school system. And that is how I discovered a man called Sheikh Anta Diop. Have you ever heard of Sheikh Anta Diop? Okay. I hope you know more than just the name. But Sheikh Anta Diop, okay, became one person who made me discover my mission and my responsibility to myself and to my people. But you go to University of the Gambia, there is no subject dealing with Sheikh Anta Diop. You go to University of the Gambia, there is no subject dealing with Kwame Nkrumah. But if you go to UK, you'll find subjects talking about Winston Churchill. If you go to France, you'll find subjects talking about Charles de Gaulle. If you go to anywhere in Europe, you'll find subjects about Socrates and Plato. But then you come to Africa, you will see no subject that is talking about the philosophies of Sheikh Anta Diop, or the philosophies, the ideas of Kwame Nkrumah, or the ideas of America Cabral, or Edward Francis Small. There's no monument in the Gambia dedicated to Edward Francis Small. And I wish we know this. The role, the contribution of Edward Francis Small to our independence, to our liberation. So, boys and girls, use your smartphones to begin to liberate your minds, to begin to question. Yes. To begin to question so that we can start to own ourselves. All right? And until that happens, we cannot be out of this poverty and corruption and oppression and exploitation, which we experience in all ways, from our homes, in our communities, by our institutions, everywhere. So let me say that I'm so happy to be here. This day, every day is African Liberation Day. It's great though, we have a school observing it today, but let us make every day African Liberation Day by doing research, by studying, by finding out about ourselves. Not from the usual books that we have or the usual narratives that they stories that they tell us, but let us search from other areas so that we begin to be the architects of our own destiny. So forward to the United States of Africa in our lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Put your hands together for him. Give it a better clap. Better one, and then this one, this one, this one. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay, just quickly. In his liberation, he said that Africa is the richest and yet poor, weak, less powerful, and controlled. And these are questions we need to ask ourselves. Why? And why are Africans risking their lives to